Councilor Lehman. Glad you're here. Let's move ahead then to item number 1. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brennan.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Councilmember Whitings.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here. Thank you so much. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Any changes, corrections? Mr. Reynolds.
Just one on the council agenda, but I also have one for the EDA that I will save until we go into the EDA meeting. But for the council, Mr. Mayor, members of council, 4C3, the CIP PA TAC 2020, PA TAC 22 TAC 10, not CIP PR TAC 23 TAC 002. The latter is referring to Huber Park, and that was changed online, and I've given copies of the correct to all of council right before the meeting.
Okay. And Councilor Whiting.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as with the modifications as mentioned.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the modified agenda. Further discussion? Discussion? By voice vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Modified agenda has been approved. Item number 4, consent business. Any changes, corrections? Mr. Reynolds?
Not that hasn't already been mentioned, sir.
Thank you. Councilor Lehman.
4C4, remove.
4C4. Others? Others? Councilor Brennan?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified. Second.
I have a motion and a second for the modified consent agenda, which would not include 4C4. There would be no further discussion. Before we vote, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for 7 September of 2021. 4A1 approves the city council meeting minutes for 17 August of 2021. 4A2 approves the application and grants a tobacco license to Shakopee 1997 LLC doing business as Cub Liquor at 1262 Veerling Drive. 4A3 approves the on-sale and Sunday liquor licenses for Texas Roadhouse Holdings LLC on condition that final inspections are passed. 4A4 adopts Resolution R 2021 TAC 121, certifying assessments for delinquent sewer and storm drainage accounts from July 1st, 2020 through December 21 of 2020 in the amounts of $976.25 and adds a $25 admin fee for collection with payable 2022 property taxes. It also writes off delinquent accounts less than $25, which totals $455.20. 4A5 approves 2 additional voluntary deferred compensation offerings for employees and authorizes execution of the appropriate contracts. 4B1 approves acceptance of a little free library donation from the Warner family for Glacier Park. 4C1 approves the advertisement for bids to demolish the former Scott County Workforce Center building. 4C2 approves the purchase of an electric Ford F-150 from Midway Ford for $44,000. 4C3 adopts Resolution R 2021 TAC 128, which approves an application to the DNR Conservation Partners Legacy Metro Grant Program. 4C5 adopts Resolution number R 2021 TAC 124, which approves the MCPA Diesel Replacement Program Grant Agreement. 4C6 adopts Resolution R 2021 TAC 129, which sets a public hearing date for a vacation of public drainage and utility easements in Outlot C, Summerland Place, First Edition. 4D1 declares 9 forfeited vehicles and various other properties surplus and authorizes their proper disposal or sale. 4E1 authorizes the execution of a professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink Incorporated for $283,350 to design and provide in-construction services for the West End Lift Station and Force Main Project Sewer 24 Tax 001. 4E2 approves a right-of-way and drainage and utility encroachment agreement for 1663 Norrick Street. 4E3 authorizes the execution of a cooperative construction and maintenance agreement with Scott County regarding CSAH 101. 4E4 authorizes the purchase of a 2022 sewer jetter from Flexible Pipe Tool Company for $279,908 and declares a 1993 Ford sewer jetter as surplus. And 4E5 authorizes the purchase of hardware and software to upgrade the fuel and vehicle wash station control system from Pump and Meter Services Incorporated for $54,539.76.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. I have a motion and a second for the modified consent agenda. The modified consent agenda has been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. And with that, by voice vote, all in favor, say aye. 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 Those opposed, the modified consent agenda has been approved. Thank you all very much. Moving ahead, now I'd like to call on any citizen, resident that would like to come forward on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome. On an item not on the agenda. Mr. Reynolds, have we received any electronic communication?
No, sir.
Seeing none on the recognition of involved citizens, we would move ahead then to business removed from consent and 4C4, Economic Development Administration for the American Rescue Plan application. Councilor Lehman, you had a question?
Yeah, Mayor, this was an application for the Innovation Center, is that correct? I think we're missing an opportunity because the county partnered with, I can't remember who they partnered with, in the old Q Logic building, which is a fairly new building out in Deans Lake, and we could probably fit right into that, and that would be a partnership instead of doing it our own and competing with it.
Okay. Mr. Kursky?
Oops, did I have my microphone down? I didn't have my microphone down, I'm sorry. Did you all hear that? I'm sorry.
Yes, I heard you.
All right.
Thank you, council member. So Mayor and Council, you'll see later in the EDA report, if I can get this to work here. So we've been working very closely with the Minnesota State, and we have worked with the county. That's more of a temporary space. This is a much more sophisticated facility, really aimed at meeting the needs of our community. So if you look at kind of the kit of the parts here, it's a pretty large facility, and this is kind of the flavor, since it would both serve as a general hub for a number of uses, including the university, but also the group that's currently at the county with some temporary office space, and would have much larger space here. We're working with some potential partners. These are robotics that are currently used at some of our local facilities for training, and that'll give you kind of the bigger view of this building. This isn't just some offices. This is really a major hub for both training, education, and entrepreneurs in not only Scott County, but the entire region. We've had interest. We actually have a meeting with Carver County, and there are other cities that we've been talking to that are really interested in participating.
More questions?
Well, can you tell us what's happening in the Q Logic building in the partnership with the Scott County? It sounds to me like it's the same thing. It's job development, entrepreneurship, almost like.
So Mayor and Council, they're running an entrepreneurship center over there. There's 4 offices basically, and that's it. There's no space over there for small scale production, food production, any of the things we've identified as necessary for this community. We did a pretty extensive feasibility study for this facility that showed there's a lot more demand. And in fact, when we get to the EDA, we've already had 7 high-impact entrepreneurs in the area, one of them that already has 80 employees that would never fit in that building but have issues that could be worked out in this building. So right now they're just providing 4 kind of temporary small offices over there. There is no real center. It's really mostly Southwest Metro School District that's running their programs out of there. That was kind of leftover space the CDA leased on a temporary basis. But we've been working with that group, and they would actually move into this building once it was constructed.
Yeah, Councilor Brennan?
From what I am hearing is that this building in Shakopee would be more of a hands-on construction, would have construction area for robotics and more development of widgets, let's say, and that's something that's not going to be available over at the Q-Logic building. That's more of a training, like a concept plan development for businesses. This is more of a, it will have that. It will also have spaces for businesses to come in and work together collaboratively with other businesses, and then also this area for
Mayor and
if you
Council.
had like a car that you wanted to develop something, or you wanted to teach something on a specific item.
So I was just able to pull this up. So this, you'll see in the EDA presentation, but the building is really the hub, and if you look at the different things that be going here, these are the programs already identified by Minnesota State. We've been meeting with them about twice a month. So they're agribusiness and food innovation program. They do not have a technology transfer program, so companies that are actually being developed in Mankato would actually move down here. They would have degree and certificate programs, and also a program that's been pretty successful up there that's a one-of-a-kind in the country, an entrepreneurial boot camp. And then you can see the entrepreneur network that's kind of started over in the old Q-Logic building. We actually would have entrepreneurs and residents to help some of those companies. The SBDC that's out of Minnesota State would move down here. We would have, as Councilmember Brennan mentioned, maker space where people can actually making things, co-working space, and then on site we would have both access to venture capital and to angel investors. So it's a much more kind of concierge service than they're able to offer in their current facility.
I think I toured in their grand opening facility the other day for the Southwest School and the incubator, and great concept. More of the same, because Southwest has been operating the one-stop shop. Incubator has been going. I believe that in this request here on this agenda item is for our innovation center, or the hub, is really to take those to the next level. This would be complementary on the next step for some of those businesses. I think this agenda item is to actually apply for some availability of some federal funds. We did it last year. We're doing it again this year. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. I think this would be a perfect stepping stone for some of those incubator companies from Scott County One Stop Shop. I think they were talking about organizations with less than 5 employees over there. So it's really early stage. This is over to the Hub Innovation Center would be the next step. Councilor Whiting?
Yeah, this is, we've talked about this, the Innovation Center, now the Hub, for a while, and we've always said it's going to be out there. We don't know how we're going to pay for it. Somehow this miracle money's going to come along, and along comes the, American Rescue Plan Act. So it's our time at the trough, so we can start grabbing some of this money and bringing it to Shakopee. And this is actually, you think about that, and it's like, it's our federal tax dollars. If we don't use it, someone's going to use it. But this is the grant opportunity to try and get this thing going. And I really think 5-10 years after this gets put in the future, that we'll just see a whole different downtown and just a dynamic that really changes for the better. our downtown and just makes it more of an economic hub. So I'm excited to at least see what we can get back for a grant. It's a grant opportunity. So with that, I'd make a motion to adopt Resolution R 2021-122 approving a 2021 application to the EDA American Rescue Plan Act Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Counselor Lehman, follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor. What's the square footage size difference between the empty Q-Logic building and what's proposed to be built?
Excuse me, Mayor and Council, I think Q-Logic has probably 1,500 square feet of office space. This is 33,000 square feet.
Okay. So the rest of Q-Logic is not being used at this time, is that correct?
Mayor and Council, no. The Southwest Metro School District has all of their programs, so they have relocated out of the old Scott County Workforce Center. They're in the process of closing out their lease in the old Shakopee Town Square Mall, and they have a couple other sites that they're closing out and consolidating everything into one facility. So actually, their superintendent of schools for the Southwest Metro District, I think there's 11 school districts that are officially in that, and I think there's 5 or 6 more that are unofficially in that district, are all based out of that building now.
Okay, but you said when this is built, they're gonna move out of there and then we're gonna have an empty building, correct?
No, the only thing moving out of there would be the Center for Entrepreneurship. The Southwest Metro School is staying there. They'll eventually grow into that space. That was some leftover offices they had. And so they struck a deal with the CDA to temporarily lease that because they didn't have a use for those 4 offices, but they're growing leaps and bounds with new programs. They run everything from English as a second language course over there to students that have not been able to go to regular school. They go there. I mean, it's a pretty complex program funded by the 11 school districts.
More discussion? Counselor Brennan?
No.
No? Okay, again, this is just an application in a different form a little bit than last year, but if this passes, we can see how this shapes out in the future. But I do have a motion and a second on the table. Further discussion? 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 By voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good discussion. Let's move ahead then. That concludes our business from consent. I would stand for a motion for recess for our EDA meeting. Councilor Contreras?
Make a motion to recess to the EDA meeting.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second to recess for our EDA. Further discussion, discussion, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I call to order the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting of September 7th. If staff could take the roll and everybody is present. Number 2 is the approval of agenda, and Mr. Reynolds has something.
Thank you, Madam President. Just real quickly on item 3B, you'll see we have listed as the resolution being R 2021 Tax 006. Anytime you see R, you should think E, and it's actually E 2021 Tech 006.
Okay.
If you get it wrong.
Is there any other discussion? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as modified? Mr. Whiting?
So moved.
Mr. Lehman?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Number 3 is the consent business, and on the consent business are 2 items, the EDA minutes and the Economic Development Authority Administration American Rescue Act plan application that Mr. Reynolds just referred to. Mr. Lehman?
Madam Chair, I have a question, technical question. Do I vote on the minutes when I wasn't here, or does that not matter?
I think we've had this question before. I believe you're just approving the minutes. You may not have been part of it, but you can vote on the minutes. I believe that is correct.
I've done it both ways, personally.
So have I.
We're paying you instead of him, so.
I would recommend that if you weren't there,
and you don't know what happened at the meeting, that you would not approve the minutes. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I stand corrected, thank you. I know we've had this discussion before, though, and
Is it different for the council minutes? Because I voted on that under the consent agenda and I wasn't there either.
We'll let it slide.
We're okay?
Okay. All right, so we're on the consent business. There's been a motion by Mr. Whiting. And a second by Mr. Mars.
Madam
Yes.
Chair,
Would you like to split that out?
I would request that you split that out, or I'm gonna have to vote no on both items.
I'll make a motion to approve the EDA minutes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Whiting makes a motion, Mr. Mares makes a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Notice one abstention on the minutes
You're abstaining with one abstention,
at the
thank you.
at recommendation of the attorney.
Okay. Item number
Her
3B,
money just went over.
the Economic Development Administration American Rescue Plan Act application.
Make her say it again, Matt. You want this one,
Is
Matt?
there a motion to approve? Mr. Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution E 2021-006, approving a 2020 application to the EDA American Rescue Plan Act Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant.
Is there a second? Ms. Contreras? There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Mars?
this is the exact mirror image of what we did at the council level.
Madam President, board members, that's correct. So in discussions with the federal EDA, so the city would actually be the applicant, but the EDA owns the land, so they require the landowner to also concur.
Okay. So, actually, not to preempt you here, but I thought at the council level, the vote was unanimous for this item, and now it's in the EDA, and you wanted it off consent. I thought I heard to vote against it, just,
I wanted clarification on the minutes part.
yeah, we got that.
And if we did consent, both items would be on there, and I would have to vote against the
Okay,
minutes,
okay.
which means I would have to vote against whatever else is on the consent agenda.
You were noted as,
I
4-0 and
I
abstained.
abstained from the minutes.
All right, I got that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If
So-
I would have known any better, I would have abstained from the council minutes also.
Okay,
But the record's pretty clear, I wasn't here, so
all right.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Number 4A is the proposed 2022 EDA Special Benefit Levy and Budget. And we have Mr. Reinhardt.
Good evening, President and board members. Tonight we're asking for EDA consideration of the preliminary 2022 EDA tax levy. If approved tonight, it will be forwarded to City Council for approval at the September 21st City Council meeting. The EDA special benefit levy is subject to a limit of 0.0185% of the city's estimated market value. The EDA levy cap for 22 based on that calculation is $1,025,000. The EDA levy is applied to all taxable properties within the city, including properties that are currently part of the tax abatement or TIF plan. The EDA levy is also identified on the property tax statements as a separate local tax outside the city's general property tax. The EDA levy has been the same since 2018. For 2022, staff is recommending an increase in the EDA levy of $150,000 from $350,000 to $500,000. The additional funding would provide for increasing operational costs, primarily personnel, additional professional services, and flexibility for economic development opportunities that may arise. The EDA levy is specifically designated for economic development activities, and any funds unspent from year to year would remain in the fund for that purpose. For the medium value home, if there is no change in the EDA levy of $350,000, the annual property taxes amount to $15. If the proposed levy of $500,000 is approved, the annual property taxes on the median value home would increase to $22, so a $7 annual increase. State statutes require the approval of the preliminary EDA levy by September 30th, 2021. And then the final EDA levy will be approved in December. Similar to the city's levy, the final levy can be reduced, but it cannot be increased. I have included the line item 2012 preliminary EDA budget within the council packet. This budget includes $212,000 for wages and benefits, which includes the economic development specialist plus a portion of the planning and development director's time. It also includes $20,000 for legal services, $20,000 for engineering services, and $225,000 for professional services, and then $25,000 for the Main Street program. I can answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, I ask for your consideration of Resolution E 2021-05, which adopts the proposed 2022 EDA special benefit levy of $500,000.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions of Mr. Reinhardt? Mr. Mars?
Madam President, so just, if this increase went into effect, average median would increase $7 over the year, right?
$7 annually, correct.
About 50 cents a month. Okay. And then my follow-up, since we changed the transparency of this many years ago from a general fund to a standalone special benefit levy at $350, this would be the first increase. And I think that I look back at the EDA over the last several years and go, we've certainly gotten a lot of benefit from the $350. I know there's a little more into that, but we certainly have had several redevelopment projects, both in our downtown and our west end, and I think we've done pretty well on those. So I think this would be a modest increase at what I think is 50 cents a month, a pretty minimal increase. Those are my comments on that.
Mr. Lehman?
Is that tax impact on the value of the homes as of last year, or does that take into consideration any property value increases?
So I based it upon the median value home this year. So what that is basically if we did $350,000 on this year's median value home compared to what it would be if we did $500,000 on this year's median value home. So it's not a year-to-year change. I was just showing the difference between what the additional $150,000 would be on that home.
Okay. Mr. Whiting?
Thank you, Madam President. This is taxes. This is money out of people's pocket. It's more money, but it's not that much more. And as the mayor said, I have seen the benefits over the past couple of years. You know, there's some little things like the Main Street program, and but some big things like some salaries of some employees that have been doing some great things for Shakopee. And many other little incidentals too. So I get it. I don't like raising taxes, and this is transparent, even though it's a different tax. It's just funneled for a special purpose and has to stay there for that. So with that, I would offer to adopt resolution number E 2021 TAC 005, adopting the proposed 2022 EDA special benefit levy of $500,000.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Next on the agenda is a public hearing, and that doesn't happen very often in our EDA. So, Mr. Mars?
Madam President, I'll offer a motion to open the public hearing.
Contreras seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And we have item 4B, which is modification to the Canterbury TIF plan.
Madam President and board members, we have here tonight Tom Vandenway from Baker Tilly, who's been working on this for many years, along with Julie Eddington, who's EDA's specific counsel, to answer any questions. And I will turn it over to Tom to run through the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the EDA. My name is Tom Denaway. I am with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. We are the city's municipal advisor. We've been working on this project with the city over a number of years, dating back to when we were originally Springstead Incorporated. Purpose of tonight's presentation is to kind of walk through what is in front of you as it relates to the proposed modification of TIF 18, which is the Canterbury Commons TIF district. So going to hit an overview of the proposed modification, talk about the revised budget authority being provided within the modified TIF plan, the revised development agreement, and then next steps, if you're so inclined. So the draft modification that is in front of you has been prepared to reflect revised construction cost and the inclusion of the County Highway 83 project as an eligible project expense of the TIF plan and the city's share of that portion of the cost. The modification also accounts for slight revisions to the overall development scope. Obviously, when we originally prepared the TIF plan, it was prepared in advance of a proposed development. That scope can vary slightly as the development occurs. So this modification accounts for that slight change in scope within the overall development, as well as it also more accurately reflects the anticipated post-development market values of the property. The modification reflects the actual costs spent on public infrastructure to date, and it includes additional right-of-way acquisition costs associated with the former TC outboard property that is now a drainage pond. The modification proposes including transferring a portion of the acquisition cost of the workforce center and the demolition to the TIF project cost budget, and it also proposes budget authority for increased private TIF reimbursement amounts included within the draft modification to the contract for private development. So the TIF plan is a document that provides the authority to enter into obligations. So the TIF plan sets budget authority. The actual obligations are entered into within the contract for private development. So both of those items are in front of you tonight for your review. So the TIF plan has a budget that was modified per the increased TIF revenues and the increased development scope, as well as the increased market values. So the first line item is the public infrastructure line item. So within the TIF plan, it doesn't identify between public infrastructure or privately incurred public infrastructure. They're both lumped together under that $36.7 million amount. And then the new budget includes the additional amounts for land acquisition, both public and privately reimbursed, as well as demolition, increased interest on both the pay-as-you-go note and potential bond issuances, administrative expenses, and then other TIF-eligible expenditures. And I would add a note on the other TIF-eligible expenditures. When we draft these TIF plan budgets, we are tying the budget out to the overall TIF revenue projections that are included within the plan. So that other TIF-eligible expenditure amount is an amount necessary for both the expense budget to match the revenue budget. There's no proposed cost or expenses proposed to be incurred under that other TIF-eligible expense line item at the time. Any use of funds budgeted under that line item would actually need to come back in front of the City Council for an administrative amendment for those to be specifically identified. So while that amount is there, it's really there simply for purposes that the total expense budget ties out to the total revenues within the TIF plan. Costs identified under that budget are likely to never be realized or incurred.
Counselor Lehman.
Can we get an example of what might be eligible for other TIF-eligible expenses?
If you wanted, good question as an example, if you wanted to identify affordable housing as a potential pooled expenditure of the TIF district, that is something that could be incurred under that line item. But prior to incurring any cost under that line item, you would want to bring the TIF budget back to the City Council for administrative amendment. So you would take budget authority out of that line item, specifically identify it as going towards, say, pooling for affordable housing, and it would be then, the TIF plan would be modified to reflect that. So the TIF plan can be modified administratively by the city council via resolution. It doesn't require the public hearing process like we're holding tonight, but really any use of funds under this line item would require council administrative amendment of the TIF plan budget.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Continuing on.
So moving on, so the budget that is in front of you is the budget authority of the TIF plan. The obligations that the city would actually be entering into tonight, or modifying the obligations the city has already entered into, or has previously entered into, is the development contract, or the contract for private development, which is also proposed for modification. So there are two obligations, or two categories of obligations under that contract for the private development. The first is the private developer pay-as-you-go note and private reimbursement. So the previous development agreement that was entered into by the city and by the EDA identified a budget for potential private reimbursement for up to $15.6 million in project cost. The proposed amendment tonight to the contract for private development would increase that amount from 15.6 up to 17.5. And you can see in the chart below the breakout for what those reimbursable expenses would be. So these are costs that would be privately incurred by the developer and then reimbursed over time to the extent that TIF revenue is available. So this would be the modification to the contract for private development would be modifying and increasing the amount of that pay-go note from 15.6 to about approximately 17.6 based on those costs that are outlined there. The other obligation that the development agreement creates is for the city to incur funding for public infrastructure improvements within the TIF district as well. The proposed modification to the development agreement increases that amount to $22.37 million. The city has already incurred a significant portion of that cost, which were funded through the 2020A and the 2019A bond issuances, which funded $11.8 million of that $22.7 million in costs. So the remaining amount yet to be funded out of those costs is approximately $10.5 million. The breakdown below on that chart identifies the total amount of costs incurred or to be incurred via the development agreement and funded by the city, ultimately to be reimbursed or repaid with tax increment revenue. So again, out of that almost $22.4 million, approximately 11.8 of that has already been funded.
Mr. Myers?
Madam President, on just some of these expenses here are already final, right?
Correct. 11.8 of that budget, 11.8 has already been funded by bond issuances.
Done, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So the remainder that would be left to be funded by a future potential TIF bond issuance is the $10,557,450.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be the remainder that would be yet to be funded.
Okay.
So as it relates to the projected TIF revenues, the revised TIF revenue projections included within the proposed modification of the TIF plan increased the overall projected TIF revenue authority to $116,770,763 projected to be generated over the full duration of the TIF district. The TIF district is required to be decertified upon satisfaction of the TIF pay-as-you-go note and any bond obligations that are outstanding. If that happens at an earlier date than the statutory term of the district would end early. So as of right now, the estimated future TIF cash flow based on the full development occurring is projected to be capable of A, repaying the existing and anticipated TIF pay-as-you-go obligation and future bond obligations as well as the existing obligations. In addition, the current TIF revenue projections, assuming full build-out occurs, indicates that the district may be likely to decertify early and satisfy each of the outstanding obligations, with the potential third bond issuance being the final obligation that would be satisfied, along, again, for the TIF district to be decertified earlier. Ultimately, these are projections of future TIF revenue. The actual future TIF revenues will be dictated by the level of development that is completed within the site, the tax rates that are in place at the time, and any estimated future market values. So these are future projections for revenues, but as of right now, the revenues that are projected show not only is the district capable of supporting all these obligations, but it's capable of supporting all these obligations and decertifying the district early. So finally, the next steps, if you are so inclined, would be to A, approve the resolution modifying the TIF district, as well as approve the resolution modifying the contract for private development. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Mars?
Madam President, I'm on a page Exhibit 3 that was in our packet, projected tax increment report, and I'm looking at column 2, which is the total market value. Now we have some projects that are already actually in the ground, which weren't in the ground before. Now entering 2022, you say that the market value that is known, right, is $113 million of value. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, correct. Those initial years would have been based off of actual activity within the district and actual market value created.
And then you're saying in 4 or 5 years, and I'm just picking one out here, 2027. So in 5 years, the estimated total market value would be just over $400 million?
Yeah, that is our assumption. That is the projected assumption based on the proposed development scenarios. Obviously, that market value would only be hit if those development opportunities are initiated and constructed, but that is the projection that the TIF revenue and the TIF plan is based off of.
Is it unusual to see in a TIF district the values, both current and then future, rise at that clip?
The rise that's being illustrated, if you were to take hypothetically 2022 and 2027, is not existing values increasing by that amount. It's additional development occurring within the TIF plan that hasn't yet been constructed. So it's additional apartment complexes, it's additional senior co-op units, it's additional retail and office buildings. So when we create the TIF plan and we create these TIF projections, we look at the developer scenarios for future development, and we have to estimate and project what the market value would be based off of that development plan and what the timing of it would be.
Right. I get that, and so it's staging as development gets actually hard in the ground and built, then that added value. Unlike a TIF district that is just one building, like an apartment building, that it's in the ground, the value, and it kind of goes along the timeline there, right?
Yeah, correct. If we were looking at a single parcel TIF district, you would usually see 1 or 2 years of build out, depending on how long construction periods might be, and then the value would be set. And then we might assume some modest level of market value inflation or not. We try not to just be conservative. But that's why, that's what's different here. Here we're looking at, essentially what could probably be 26 different individual districts kind of combined into one, if you were to think about it that way.
Well, I think that it's just pretty impressive over the last couple of years since this redevelopment of Canterbury started that we're at $113 million going into 2022 that is already, the value is set and we're getting to the tax season here. But, and I didn't go back and look at your original document to see where that total market value was back then that was anticipated versus hard numbers now.
I don't think I have the original document with me, and I'd have to go back to look to see what that was.
Thank you.
The one thing I would note is the market value that's shown for pay 2022 there is actual construction that would have occurred in 19, construction that would have occurred in 20, assessed in 21, paid in 2022. So there's still even more development that's in the ground that's yet to come on.
What I thought was really interesting is on page 28, the statement that says that, page 27, that if it wasn't for this development, the proposed development, I'm going to read the thing because I'm messing it up. If the proposed development to be assisted with tax increment occurs in the district, the total increase in market value will be approximately $461,000. And it says later on that this would not occur if we did not do this TIF district in letter D. So I think that's pretty amazing to see happen. Mr. Lehman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions, and I'm going to use the same Exhibit 3, and just to go out 10 years, I'll use the year 31, 10 years from now. Market value of $461 million. So that's assuming full build-out because it stays the same for the rest of the duration. So can you tell me how many tax dollars in the year 2031 are going into the general levy for services to this area?
In 2031, the property taxes that are being paid by the development in its existing state prior to the creation of the TIF district will continue to flow to each of the taxing jurisdictions. So the base level of taxes will continue to go to each of the taxing jurisdictions, which would have been the amount based off of a base value. I don't know if the base value of the district would have been, looks like 32.9 million. So each of the taxing jurisdictions will continue to collect taxes applicable to 32.9 million in the base market value.
So $431 million worth of market value essentially won't pay new taxes into the general levy for services to the area.
The increase in taxes resulting from the increase in market value over and above the base is captured as TIF. That tax increment revenue does get set aside as TIF revenue, which is separate and distinct from general fund tax dollars, correct?
It doesn't go into the general fund to pay for services to the area?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
One more.
Yeah, Mr. Mars?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did have two.
Yep.
The second one is that if we use the same 461 from 2031, obviously when the market value of a community goes up substantially and you spread the levy into all that market value, you're lowering the tax rate, but you're not necessarily lowering the financial burden. Now, that would be true if you had the dollars coming in instead of going to the TIF. So anytime you can raise the market value, it lowers the tax rate, but it doesn't necessarily lower your taxation.
If you assumed a flat operating levy and an increase in market, assuming a flat levy, an increase in market rate would result in a lowering of the tax rate and vice versa.
So how do you bring $461 million into the market value with $0 in the general levy to support the services and expect a lowering of taxes?
I believe that I would refer to that to the EDA and the city council as a policy question.
Okay.
We've made this TIF decision, yeah.
Yep,
We're moving
yep.
on, yeah.
Mr. Mars?
I don't know. Because of the level and speed of development, it seems like the value of Canterbury's redevelopment is happening a little faster with more stuff in the ground. You talk about if we have all this stuff and it goes, that the decertification based off of some value could happen sooner. Is that correct?
Correct. Based off the TIF revenue projections, it does look like that the district would be capable of satisfying the current and proposed future obligations at a duration shorter than the overall period of the TIF district.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Whiting?
Just to add another thought, and I think some of this has grown because we've consolidated some of these properties. Now the roads are in, it's, it's becoming more valuable, of course. But I do think that consolidation we recently did really helped make that property over there, the potential just jump up. And now you're assuming on these market values of the potential of this build out. Are you using conservative values? Are you kind of building it out at the highest level of what the proposed potential could be?
No, thank you. It's an excellent question. In preparing these TIF revenue projections, we kind of break it down on a per unit basis to how many apartments are being proposed, how many square feet or what the retail square footage is going to be, et cetera. And we actually had conversations with the county assessing staff. And a lot of, for example, a lot of the apartment assumptions for the existing apartments and then the future additional apartments comes right off of the existing value that they've already applied on a per unit basis to the apartments. So, we went to the closest and best source we can get for those future value assumptions, which was the county assessing department to evaluate and provide what they thought were reasonable assumptions. So, anytime I can point to a nice valid resource like that, it makes my job a lot easier.
Mr. Lehman?
I'm assuming that we know these are just estimates. They're best guess estimate, basically. And they're reliant on, anything can throw a curveball in it. You could have a economic growth crash or something, or housing market changes or whatever. You could have a financial collapse, whatever happens in the next 15 years, all which will impact these numbers. Correct?
Absolutely.
This is also a pay-as-you-go note, so if there's no development that occurs, there's no payout out of the TIF. So that is also affecting the...
Madam Chair, I'll just point out that that's the risk side of it. If you're going to put in public improvements, hoping that this development happens, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself in case something changes and the development doesn't happen, then you're stuck with the infrastructure.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Madam President, I believe that this is a pay-as-you-go TIF, and so yes, we have some skin in the game, but I believe even at this level, if there was no other development stake in the ground and the current developments that are in the ground finished, that the value of those projects without another project would carry the day in regard to the investment that we've made in public infrastructure. So I believe we would be covered there. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, there are two sets of obligations. There are pay-as-you-go obligations, and the city has issued 2 bond issuances to be repaid by the TIF revenue. And prior to each of those issuances, we have analyzed, just with the level of development that has occurred, what the TIF revenue cash flow from those developments based off that existing market value would be, and it was capable of supporting the existing bond issuances that are already out there. And prior to any future bond issuances, we would want to balance and do that analysis to, again, what has been built out in that interim period and what is that capable of supporting, because we want to be as conservative as possible and when it comes to estimating future TIF revenues versus existing city bonded obligations or new bonded obligations to make sure there is that coverage, because it is unknown.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other questions? This is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak on this issue, you can come forward. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing? Mr. Mars, and seconded by Ms. Contreras. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing has been closed. Is there any other questions for the staff? Is there Mr. Mars?
Just for staff, Madam President, in regard to this, the County Road 83 and finishing off at 12th Avenue would be included in this modification?
Mr. President, board members, correct. So we originally, in the original TIF budget, I believe the TIF was contributing $1.4 million towards County Highway 83. All of the expenses now for County Highway 83 have been moved off the city ledger and put into the TIF.
Okay.
Mr. Reynolds.
Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just state that the reason it was only 1,400,000 is because that's what the mayor and I were told by the former county administrator, that the whole process, the whole price for the city would be. And so now that it's 4.7 million, I guess, at this point, we kind of had to find some money, so.
Yep.
County's looking for money, yeah.
Comments? Mr. Kursky?
Madam President and board members, so as was mentioned, so the second phase of Triple Crown is in for its building permit. As many of you have seen, the Pulte project is well under construction and for building permits for their townhouses. And on the Planning Commission agenda for Thursday is a luxury senior project that'll contribute probably $35 to $40 million in additional value. And as Mr. Dunaway said, it takes about 2 years for these all to come back online. That's why there's some stagger in the Tif revenue. But the good news in speaking with the school district, they've had one student come out of the first phase of Triple Crown, a high school student. Clearly, there will be no students coming out of the senior co-op or the luxury senior apartment project coming in. And there might be some that come out of the townhouses, but it's fairly unlikely since it's mostly people moving out of an existing single-family home for less maintenance. So, but it's pretty exciting to see the private development that's occurring pretty, as the mayor mentioned, pretty rapidly.
Yeah, it really is. Is there any other comments? Ms. Contreras?
If we're all done, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution E 2021-008, modifying the Canterbury TIF plan.
Motion. Is there a second? Mr. Mars?
Madam Chair, or Madam President, I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve or adopt resolution number E 2021-008, modifying the Canterbury TIF plan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is item number 4C. And Mr. Kursky, this is a modification to contract with private development for the Canterbury TIF and TIF note.
Madam President, board members, so everything you've talked about basically is reflected in the new contract for private development. So as Mr. Dunaway pointed out, they are now recapturing the right-of-way that was acquired for the retention pond where TC Outboard was and some additional costs that the private developer incurred. But as was pointed out earlier, we are in first position for the Tif revenue, so while theoretically they'll get paid, they're accruing interest on that, however, not getting paid until the city bonds get paid.
Okay. Is there any questions for Mr. Kursky? Can I get a motion, or what would you like to do? Mr. Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number E 2021-007, modifying the contract for private development for Canterbury TIF and the TIF note.
Second.
So there's been a motion and a second by Contreras. Is there any other questions? Questions? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, signify. The motion passes 4-1. Let me see here. It's all good until you, on the computer, until you have to go to the next item. The next item is number 5A. Is that correct? 4D. Oh, I'm sorry. Number 4D, which is the extension of contract with Momentum LLC for the entrepreneurial support services. Mr. Kursky.
So, Madam President, board members, so we are asking to continue this contract at a lesser amount through September, October, November, and December to continue working on this. As we looked at this earlier, they have been concentrating on really building out kind of the entrepreneurial network that's in the upper left-hand corner, and also assisting us in several other areas, including the entrepreneur in residence. They've actually been able to find some really interesting companies that none of us actually even knew were in this market. So for instance, the founder of the rollerblade company, who's actually been on Shark Tank and a very successful serial entrepreneur who kind of retired to this area, has had a couple other companies that just by accident have been pretty successful, and he was able to reach out to him, had a couple of really good meetings with him, and then there's a local entrepreneur that's working on a completely different product, but those two met and were able to connect, and he has technology that's actually going to help the other guy on his project, and they've become friends. They actually came to a meeting here with all the other entrepreneurs and drove together. So our one person drove a guy he had only met 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the most interesting thing is the entrepreneurs have said the most lonesome job in the world is being an entrepreneur, because you don't have anyone to talk to. There's, even if you're over at the current Entrepreneur Center, it's limited to a lot of other people you can talk to, and to have 7 very high-profile entrepreneurs sit in a room and all talk privately about what their issues are and what kind of programming they would need. So one of the first things we're working on is, believe it or not, even some very successful companies that you don't know about have not been able to get search engine optimization from Google. And so working with Minnesota State University and their SBDC, we're going to bring in a person who's an expert to tell them about how it works, because even one company that has, I believe, 80 employees said no one on their staff has been able to figure it out. So Minnesota State offered to bring someone in that kind of specializes that at the university, who works kind of nationwide. So it's been really good. The other piece that's on this chart that's been a tremendous help, and I'll address it kind of towards the end, is the Angel Investor Network. So everything on this side of the river really has zero support right now. There is no Angel Network. They're really concentrated mostly in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they mostly do apps for your phone or medical device. And it was interesting to hear all of our entrepreneurs say, if I have to go one more meeting where they're talking about med tech, I may just jump out a window. Because they have really good ideas, but they go to these meetings and nobody really wants to talk to them. And so we are working on creating a potential angel network for this side of the river that won't be necessarily focused on med tech, but focused on things people are actually working on here. So there's a huge potential. We had a meeting with one of the board members of the National Angel Investor Network, who is really excited because we're doing some stuff here that is not occurring, which is kind of in advanced manufacturing and kind of new ideas. Everyone's kind of concentrating on software because it's kind of the hot topic. But they realize a lot of the jobs long-term come out of those manufacturing companies, so they're really excited. And so we had a meeting with the National Angel Investor Network staff, and they've actually invited the city to join that network. We'll be, I think, one of the 3rd or 4th cities in the country. They have 250 network members, so that's a pretty exciting thing for the city to be engaged in. We've had numerous meetings with Minnesota State University. I don't know if most of you might know, they have a new president. He's been briefed. We're going to be meeting with him and his senior management staff, but they're really excited. If you look at their programs, they're pretty deep. The interesting thing, unlike the U, who makes a ton of money off of technology transfer that comes from both their students and from their professors, Minnesota State does not currently run that program. And so they're very excited about setting up kind of a pathway for good ideas and companies that are occurring in Mankato to actually move down here and see if they can take a great idea and really make it into a company and a business. And one of the things that we benefit from is there's a lot of industrial space here that's going to age out over the next 5 to 10 years. And one of two things happen to it. It either drops tremendously on the tax roll and value, or we find new use for it. So other cities have found that these newer startup companies can occupy that space fairly inexpensively. They don't need a lot of changes to it. They don't need to change the floor to ceiling heights. And so we already have one of those companies that's moved into one of those buildings. And so our goal is to have a lot of companies over the next 5 to 10 years move into that space so it retains its tax value, but also creates a lot of jobs in the community. I talked about a company, when we met with them probably 2 years ago, they were 24 people. Right now they're 80, and they are Shakopee residents and really interested in, and we're excited about this. But again, they're still pretty small, even at 80 employees, and looking to the future, how much bigger they can get. But those really are kind of the job growth engines for the future. It's not going to be some mega company that moves here, corporate headquarters, because through the pandemic, they found out how to do things differently. They've not figured out how to manufacture things remotely. So a lot of that interest is still here. Companies that want to make stuff in the United States and not import stuff. It's a really, I think, exciting time for Shakopee. They've also been working on our marketing campaign. So these are just some of the early images we've been working with. So we took companies that had names that people in the marketplace would recognize. So the Make It in Shakopee. So this is Bear Crop Science. And one of the things we have been coached on that it really needs to be something that hits people really quickly. So Bear Crop Science, innovating to grow a healthier world. This is Cameron's Coffee, roasted locally, served globally, since they are now owned by a company out of Colombia and serving not only the United States but Canada. Emerson, the best insights using measurement technologies. That's what they're known for. Again, carrying our logo, Make It in Shakopee. RAR Corporation, one of the largest malt producers in the world. And then KB America. It was interesting. Valley Fair didn't realize the technology that runs their rides is actually made in Shakopee. So it was a great thing. They actually gave us this picture when they found out that a bunch of their rides, KEB actually supplied the technology that makes them work. And then Entrust, they changed their name from Entrust Data Card, but here, I think this is a great one. Securing identities, payments, and access around the world, since they are one of the largest manufacturers of the equipment that make your credit card and passports. So our Kickstart summary to date, as I mentioned, we had our first meeting actually here in City Hall with the 7 high-impact entrepreneurs. We propose that Momentum continue to provide ongoing concierge services. They require a lot of hand-holding and a lot of phone calls and meetings. Again, I mentioned the Angel Capital Association. We've met with their staff and a board member. City's been invited to join. We are in discussions with a potential funder for the Angel Capital Network. And then again, Minnesota State's positioning. They have a award-winning boot camp that we're talking about them bringing that down here now. We actually went up and they actually have a varsity gaming team, which was kind of surprising, that competes nationwide. They're also one of the leaders of people in game design, something that I don't think anybody down here knew. Their SPDC is looking at servicing our clients here and moving down here. And then again, we've met with their main faculty to explore programming options for both now and the future going into the hub.
All right, I think that's a great, you're looking at the marketing aspect of it, but also taking a look at what's the potential for the future of Shakopee, and I think that's combining it all in one contract or working with one company to do that is very beneficial. Mr. Whiting?
So we did a $50,000 3-month contract with Momentum, and we're looking for a 1-month extension.
Madam President and board members looking to extend it for September, October, November, December at $7,500 plus any expenses.
For total or per month?
$7,500 a month.
30 grand for 4 months plus
80
expenses.
grand in the end, yeah.
It's 30 grand, sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
30 grand for 4 months plus expenses, and we don't know what the expenses are.
Right.
So the question I have is, we need to find a cap on this.
Madam Chair, so they won't be coming here in September. We've already identified we'd rather have them work remotely on our EDA grant. So potentially they'll be here for meetings in October, November, and December. Their average meeting cost has been about $1,500 or $1,600 for air travel, hotel, and expenses.
Okay, is there any other comments? Mr. Mars?
Madam President, in watching this Momentum LLC and getting updates here at the council and talking to you over the Innovation Center, the hub, the entrepreneurial aspect, I'm pretty impressed with, compared to what I saw the last time, 4 or 5 months ago, or what this looked like 9 months ago or a year ago. It seems actually to be coming a little bigger, but yet more focused and more dedicated. And
Less training space.
Huh?
Less training space.
right.
I don't get it.
Our partners, the people that want to be involved has enlarged. The Minnesota State's still on board. I think that's pretty impressive as we move along here and applying for a federal grant for that. And so that's kind of my take on this.
Okay, Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everybody understands as well, Madam Chair, that this will be coming out of the federal funding, not the EDA budget itself. And this is exactly the kind of programs that federal funding was designed for. And it's good that we are able to utilize it in that kind of a vein here in Shakopee.
Madam President, the other thing I will say is, so 10 years ago, Momentum started in another city, and they had 3 people that sat around the table. And in 3 months, they got 7 very high-impact entrepreneurs. I mean, it was very dynamic to see the kind of the personalities and how successful some of these people have been. Never been in the same room together, never talked about their issues and concerns and ideas. So it will only grow. That program that was started 10 years ago, I think it's 125 companies today. And that city is spending $500,000 now sending that message out kind of nationwide that there's hundreds of companies that have been generated there. I think this is a huge opportunity. I mean, I think going into this, we weren't sure we were going to have one person sitting, in a room, and to be able to get 7 people that are actually committed to meeting and committing to finding other entrepreneurs and getting together and addressing problems and growing their companies is pretty cool.
Mr. Whiting?
This is one of those contracts that I get worried about because it's just wide out. The prize is out there. And so what I'd like to see is some benchmarks. And what are we asking for? What are our expectations? And are we meeting those benchmarks? To me, it's like blank check.
Mr. Lehman?
I'm gonna, I understand where you're coming from, Councilor Whiting, and I take a little bit different tack to this. And while I agree with you, I kind of look at this as a professional think tank, if you will. You're gathering some very experienced people from all over the place, getting them together, looking at a scenario which is exclusively our community, and trying to figure out the best way to put a plan together, short-term, mid-term, long-term. So I'm not necessarily opposed to this. The problem I have is it's just wide open on the expense side. So I know we're talking about October, November, and December, right? You've got here $7,500 a month plus expenses. So let's put a number together that's per month, including expenses, so we know what we're actually doing.
So Madam President, board members, I would suggest over those 3 months, I think they had about $5,000 in expenses that we used that number not to exceed. And they were very careful in how that money got spent. We have a potential user that,
So 45 is what you're saying for 3 months. 75 per month plus 5 per month of expenses, not to exceed 5.
not to exceed $5,000 from now until the end of the year for expenses.
Okay.
Mr. Myers?
Madam President, I hear this about what we're going and 7,500 plus expenses, pretty open, but down in the discussion point, we can just cap it at 50,000. If it's a monthly amount plus expenses not to exceed 50,000, then the staff would have to come back.
Well, Madam President, we're capping their contract right now, I believe, at 30,000. So I think to cap it at 35 would solve that problem. 5,000 in expenses and 30,000 for their time.
Mr. Whiting?
It's business expenses. I'm not worried about somebody lavish spending on business expenses. It's travel, it's food, it's lodging. My concern is a benchmark of what our expectations are. What do we want met? A number. What is our goal?
So Madam President and board members. So our goal is to get the EDA grant done and meet all the issues that they had with the first round, which we've gone through with them extensively. And then getting those 7 companies, I mean, I'd be happy to see 10 if you can find 3 more or friends. But also that angel piece, they're very experienced in that, and all I can tell you is we're working on something that potentially could be huge, but they require a lot of hand-holding, which neither I or Ms. Brewington have the time to do. So we're talking a lot of phone calls and a lot of meetings when he's here with those people, because they, like you, if you're gonna ask to invest $1 million, and I'm gonna tell you, your chances of getting that back are somewhere between 1 in 10. They have to have some confidence that the program that's developed, that 1 out of 10, maybe they get their money back, plus it's a bigger factor on that.
No, I mean, if we would look for that EDA grant, trying to grow the company group, and hopefully angel investors, I won't hold that goal to you, but I think that's a great goal. I think then I can see where this could go within the bounds of what we're looking at here.
Mr. Lehman?
Let me try to make a motion here. And I think 50 is high because they're not doing September. They're doing October, November, December at 75 times 3, 21.
Mr. Lehman, no, they're working.
35.
They're not here in September, but they're working for us in September.
Okay.
So it's $30,000 for time, and then I suggest the expenses not to exceed 5,000.
Okay. So I'll make that in a motion. And so it's 30,000 to the end of the year and 5,000 for expenses, not to exceed 5,000 for expenses.
It's been a motion. Is there a second? Angelica, Ms. Contreras is seconds.
And if I could speak to the motion. And I agree with Councilor Whiting, but I think where the disconnect might be is, and correct me if I'm missing this, but it seems like we're putting this group together to do the legwork for if the innovation dollars are successful, that we have something to immediately go in and start the process, and you've got something in the briefcase instead of starting fresh.
Yep.
Madam Chair, and board members, that's exactly correct. One of the EDA questions was, all right, we give you this money and you build this 33,000 square foot building, who's going into it? Do you have an entrepreneurial network now of people that have been meeting and are successful? I mean, who are the entrepreneurs and they went down that whole list that you saw in that diagram, and now we can actually say, here's the plan, here's the 7 companies right now, here's potential entrepreneurs and residents, and here's the programs the universities are ready to launch now.
Yeah, and the key there wasn't just the businesses, it's the, universities and maybe technical colleges on animation or whatever it might be. There's more than just businesses. It's a lot of different, you have to have the university aspect, you have to have the technical college specialist, whether it's automation or fiber optic technology or whatever. But then you're also going to have the entrepreneurs with the financial ability to take a good idea that comes out of the innovation center and put it into practice, and willing to back it because they say, you know what, that's a really good idea. I think I'm going to invest my own money into this because I believe strongly and it's going to be the future. They invest, let's say it's $10 million into a widget company here somewhere, and 20 years later it's Coca-Cola or something and it's flying off the shelves. They now get their money back, plus they get to expand. So I get it.
Is there any other discussion? Motion on the table and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the EDA bill list. And does anybody have any questions regarding the EDA bill list? Okay. And then the next on the agenda is the motion to adjourn to Tuesday, October 7th Ms. Contreras makes the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Whiting seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Back to City Council.
We will reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for September 7th, 2021, just coming out of our EDA meeting. And we will move ahead then to 9A1, which is a resolution approving the First Amendment to Canterbury contract for private developer and Tif note. Councilor Whiting?
Mr. Mayor, this is a mirror, I take it, image of what we just talked about in the EDA. So with that, I would make a motion to offer Resolution R 2021-130, approving the First Amendment to the contract for private development with the Economic Development Authority with Canterbury Development LLC and Canterbury Park Holding Corporation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Contreras. This is a mirror image of our action in our EDA. Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Moving ahead then to 9A2, resolution approving the modification to the Canterbury TIF plan, another mirror image of what we discussed during the EDA meeting. Questions of staff?
I'd like to make a motion to approve this.
Councilor Contreras, okay.
Thank you. Approve resolution number R 2021-131, modifying the Canterbury TIF plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Contreras, and again, this modification does carry fully incorporates the proposed County Road 83 project that hopefully will start in '22, and it will take care of the city's obligation from that, so that is good. Further discussion, motion on the table. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you all very much. And moving ahead then to 10A, the city bill list. Are there any questions, comments on that? Seeing none, we would move ahead to our liaison report. And how about we start with Councilmember Contreras tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just trying to go back. I was going back to last time we were here. So for my liaison reports, the equity team, we are going through some staff turnover. So we are reorganizing, recharging to get back on track. That's where we stand there. For the school board did something pretty cool. So they passed a resolution where we are now participating together in it's called here. Let me do this right. We're joining forces with the cities. They're joining forces with the cities on the Green Step it's a companion program called Minnesota Green Step Schools. So we will be the first city and school doing this, where we're working together. We will have let me see. We're gonna, let's see, let me figure this out. The idea is to seek the support and work with school staff and administrators, students, and parents to ensure a safe and healthy environment, provide hands-on learning opportunities, and engage students by encouraging our school community to partner with us, the city, and outside organizations to implement sustainable, energy-smart, eco-friendly, and cost-effective solutions. Now, once again, it is the first city and school working together to do this. And the schools are they're super ahead, and it's just gonna, us working with them and them working with us, is just gonna make a better team. And one of the things that the teacher was saying, that that's called the Sun Club, it's a way of selling. He was always wondering, how can he showcase and sell the work that the students do, and now having the support of the city, and also working with all 6 academies, it's just it's a great opportunity, working together just to make things better, so that's awesome. And then let's see, that was that. And then I just wanted to, you know, the things I did throughout the week. I attended Picnic with the Cop, because I think that was the day after our last meeting. And then I attended the ribbon cutting for the Exile Energy mountain bike, which that also is a great partnership. And then was also at the ribbon cutting for Scott County Center for Entrepreneurship. And that was it. A lot of stuff.
Counselor, thank you for your work. Appreciate it. Counselor Whiting?
Not as busy as that, but I did make the ribbon cutting at the mountain bike park. That was great. Like you mentioned, great partnership with Exile and the school district and others. We do that well. Other than that, nothing to report.
Thank you. Counselor Lehman, we're very glad you're back.
I don't have a report. I was busy doing the things I disliked the most.
Thank you very much. Counselor Brennan?
Yep, I had the SPU meeting, and I left early this evening to come here, but there's a couple major things that were approved by the SPU, and one of them is the copper. We had a discussion regarding copper versus plastic water services. For a long time, the SPU was only allowing copper from the curb stop to the residents. And this evening, the commission approved changing that to plastic water services. That will reduce the cost of on the developer to install that service. And really, the SPU staff felt that there was no reason not to do it. So that's really good. And really, it's, you know, the copper was being stolen from those developments. And this will really benefit the whole development community.
Can I ask a question?
Question, Counselor Lehman?
And this might be for you or the engineer, but are the modern plastics for water pipes as hardy as copper has been over the course of the century? I know they got some pretty decent plastics nowadays, but...
Yeah, and really, we discussed the fact that the plastic and the copper is both in the plumbing code, and they're both acceptable forms of using a water service. And it was felt that there was very minimal leaching that would occur, if any, and also the copper corrodes and corrodes over time, and there's issues with the flanging of the joints and putting things together, and there's also less chances of pinpoint leaking in that area. So that's really good. And then the Tank 8, which is in the Windermere area, and they're painting the interior currently, and they still feel that they're in line with November online. And then pumpage is resorting to normal time so that there's not any further restrictions needed, and they've gone back to flushing the water, or flushing the hydrants, fire hydrants.
Restrictions aren't no longer necessary, you said?
Yeah, just what we've been doing, the odd and evens, yeah.
Okay.
But nothing more is needed. Okay. And I also attended the ribbon cutting for the Quarry Lake Bike Park, or the Exile Center Bike Park, and that's all I got.
Counselor, thank you very much. My liaison report, I attended on 8/18 the picnic with the cops and stuff a squad car full of school supplies for kids. When I left, they were up to 4 squads full of school supplies. Great turnout, real nice event. Would like to thank the cops for their participation. Also, I attended the Exile mountain bike course grand opening. Great partnership. The thing that caught my eye was at least 40 bikers ready to go on that course. And then the most thing that really caught my eye was the age range. There was a quaint older gentleman that perhaps might have been in his 70s, ready to go, helmet on, and then there was a small youth or child, I'm not sure how old, but I mean, just out of training wheels that was gonna go on the course. I think that young girl is on the video. Great to see I mean, they were all ready to go, so, great thing on that. Also went, to the Scott County, Center for Entrepreneurship. Also on August, 24th, the Chamber had their Leadership Day, or their leadership group. I call it, they had Government Day, where I think, the city administrator spoke, and then, elected officials, and maybe the county spoke in the morning, so, I think that's my 4th or 5th year doing that. Great class for the chamber. I think it's a great opportunity. And, this Friday, 11:15, the Memorial Park, Bridge, ribbon cutting, to open that and actually make another trail connection that's been missing in our community for a while, so, good news. That is my report, and then we would hear from Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I don't know if everyone in the public knows it, but I'm more than happy to talk about it now. The addition of a award-winning reporter, Amanda McKnight, has come aboard as our communications manager. Delighted to have her on staff, and she's hit the ground running, and it's been great to see her fit right into the city. And with that, I will call it a night.
Well, thank you very much. Moving ahead then, on item number 11, is there any other business before this council? Other business? Seeing none then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councilor Contreras?
And to adjourn until Tuesday, September 21st, 2021 at 7 p.m.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:35.